In 1972, a Uruguayan plane crashed in the Andes. There were 45 people on board, and many of them lost their lives. Despite the tragedy, people viewed what happened as a miracle. To understand exactly what went down, we need to go back in time a bit. At the beginning of October 1972, we see a rugby match in Uruguay. Marcelo, the team captain, asks Roberto to pass the ball, but Roberto refuses to pass until the ball is intercepted and stolen from him. Naturally, the team loses the match, and everyone blames Roberto. In the locker room, Marcelo explains that they have a crucial match coming up in Chile. He tells them to prepare well and leave their selfishness behind. One of the teammates, Numa, refuses to travel with them because he has college exams. But the next day, his teammates convince him to postpone his exams and join them because he's a key player on the team. The team arrives at the airport, says their goodbyes to their families, takes a group photo, and sets off on their journey. Flight 571 takes off with 40 passengers and 5 crew members on board. The team is enjoying the flight, and everyone is laughing. But suddenly the plane starts to shake, and fear begins to creep in. Even though the captain tries to reassure them, telling them to fasten their seatbelts as they prepare to land at Santiago Airport, the turbulence gets worse and the situation becomes unsettling. Moments later, the plane begins to plummet at a terrifying speed. Everyone is paralyzed with fear. And then, the moment of truth. The plane slams into the Andes Mountains and shatters. Many passengers are killed instantly, while the survivors suffer severe injuries from the impact. However, Numa and a few of his teammates find themselves in relatively good shape. They immediately start helping the injured, led by Roberto, who happens to be a medical student. After pulling the survivors out of the wreckage, they head to the cockpit. The pilot is still alive, but he's in critical condition. One of the guys tries to use the radio, but it's dead. Numa approaches the captain to help him, but the captain simply whispers, "May God protect you." It's as if the pilot knows that survival is almost impossible. At night, the temperature drops well below freezing. The survivors huddle together inside the wreckage to keep each other warm. In a desperate attempt to survive the biting cold, they surround themselves with the bodies of the deceased passengers to create a barrier. The next morning, a ray of sunlight brings a glimmer of hope. But as they step out of the wreckage, the reality hits them. They are stranded in the heart of the Andes. Snow surrounds them in every direction, with no sign of a road or civilization in sight. They begin dragging the bodies out of the wreckage to make room for themselves and the injured to sleep. They gather all the food found in the luggage and ration it into tiny portions to make it last as long as possible. Suddenly, they hear the sound of rescue planes. They start screaming at the top of their lungs, hoping to be heard, but it's useless. Despite the crushing disappointment, they cling to a shred of hope. When night falls, they gather inside the fuselage to sleep, piling up suitcases and clothes to seal the opening and shield themselves from the freezing snow. The next day, one of the teammates, Nando, is struggling with a severe injury. Tragically, his sister is also with him, and her condition is just as critical. As their water supply runs out, a teammate named Fito comes up with a plan. He starts fashioning metal sheets from the plane's debris to collect snow, using the sun's heat to melt it into drinking water. A short while later, they spot a plane flying overhead. They start using mirrors to signal it, and one of them shouts that the pilot saw them because the plane tilted its wings. Everyone is overjoyed, celebrating what they believe is their imminent rescue. But as time passes and the plane doesn't return, doubt begins to creep in. Some of them lose hope entirely, especially since they know a human being can't survive without food for more than 3 weeks. Numa suggests searching for the rest of the wreckage. The goal is to find the batteries in the tail section to fix the radio transmitter. The team agrees to the plan. Numa, Fito, and 2 others set out after gathering whatever gear they could find. However, once they scale the mountain, they lose sight of the plane's fuselage. Terrified of getting lost and never finding their way back, they decide to postpone the mission until they can find a way to navigate and track their location. Days pass, and the situation turns grim. They go 6 days without a single bite of food. The situation becomes so desperate that one of them suggests the unthinkable: eating the flesh of the deceased. Naturally, everyone refuses, viewing it as an unforgivable sin in the eyes of God. Instead, they resort to eating inanimate objects. Some chew on shoelaces, others try to eat the leather from the plane seats. They even resort to eating cigarettes instead of lighting them. Nando notices that his sister isn't moving. When he tries to talk to her, he discovers that she has passed away. In a state of profound grief, he carries her and buries her in the deep snow. By their 9th day, hunger has completely consumed them. The biting cold is literally eating away at their skin. Fito tells them they will all die without protein. He makes the agonizing decision to go out and eat from the corpses, telling the others that if he dies, they have his permission to eat his body. Fito and a few others actually go through with it. While Marcelo and Numa refuse to join them, others find themselves forced to go out just to survive. The next morning, they discover a small radio in one of the passengers' bags. Their friend Roy, who studied telecommunications engineering, starts repairing it, trying to catch any signal. He finally picks up a broadcast, but he wishes he hadn't. Over the radio, they hear the devastating news. The search operations for the missing plane have been called off. At that moment, everyone loses any remaining hope of being rescued. Shortly after, Numa heads out to search the surroundings for any debris. Instead, he finds the bodies of their teammates buried in the snow. Suddenly, an avalanche strikes, forcing them to spend the night in the middle of a blizzard separated from the rest of the group. Against all odds, they survive the freezing temperatures. The next morning, they fashion a makeshift sled from the wreckage and use it to make their way back. On the 17th day, everyone is gathered inside the plane, sharing a rare moment of happiness. But their joy is short-lived. A massive avalanche hits, burying the entire plane under a thick layer of snow. Some managed to claw their way out from under the ice and immediately started rescuing the others. Tragically, they lost several people, including Marcelo. Many others remained trapped beneath the wreckage. 4 days later, Numa decides to use every ounce of his strength to break the glass and escape from under the debris. Despite his injuries, he succeeds in breaking through, followed by the rest of the survivors. Some suggest leaving the site immediately to search for a way out. However, others urge them to wait until the temperatures rise to ensure their survival. After 34 days, the snow begins to melt. However, some, like Arturo, are in terrible condition and can no longer hold on. On the 36th day, 4 people volunteer to scout the area, and Numa is among them. But along the way, Numa discovers that his foot has developed a severe infection. The team wants to head back, but Numa insists they push forward while he returns alone. As the days pass, they lose more friends and hope begins to vanish entirely. The 3 scouts eventually return and tell Numa what they found. After 4 hours of trekking eastward, they stumbled upon the tail section of the plane. There, they found suitcases filled with cigarettes, drinks, and chocolate. Numa is overwhelmed with joy as he tastes chocolate for the first time in weeks. More importantly, they found the batteries, but they are too heavy to carry back. They realize they must take the radio transmitter to the tail section instead. They set out once again, taking Roy with them to fix the device. Roy successfully repairs the radio, but tragically, no one answers from the other side. Numa's condition continues to deteriorate, and he is now on the verge of death. Despite his suffering, he still steadfastly refuses to eat the flesh of his deceased friends. The scouting team loses all hope and decides to head back to the main group. However, they leave a desperate note on the tail section of the plane, stating that there are survivors still alive. They hope that if anyone ever reaches that spot, they'll know they aren't alone. At the same time, they manage to find some waterproof fabric. They bring it back to the group, explaining that they can fashion sleeping bags out of it. This could be their only protection if they are forced to spend a night out in the open, away from the plane. The next day, they turn on the radio and hear some good news. The rescue teams are resuming the search, but remarkably, no one is happy to hear it. After being missing for 2 full months, they've learned not to trust in promises anymore. As the days pass, Numa's condition takes a turn for the worse. He eventually tells Nando that he gives them his explicit permission to eat his body once he's gone. True to the tragic reality of their situation, Numa passes away that very night. The following day, the scouting team decides to set out on another journey, this time heading west. It has been 61 days since the crash. The journey is grueling and exhausting, but the handmade sleeping bags protect them from the biting frost. After traveling a long distance, they find themselves still surrounded by endless mountains, their view blocked by towering peaks. But Nando reassures them that the snow will melt soon. Now they face a life-altering choice: keep pushing forward in search of hope or turn back to the plane. Nando and Roberto decide to press on while their third companion chooses to return to the wreckage to save what little food remains for the others. One night, Nando and Roberto manage to light a fire for the very first time. They eventually reach a river, and there they encounter a magnificent surprise. A local man on horseback appears in the distance. Behind him lies lush green vegetation. Finally, they have escaped the blinding white of the snow. The man breaks the news to the Chilean Air Rescue Service. The commanding officer pinpoints their location and immediately dispatches rescue teams. Meanwhile, Nando and Roberto are at a nearby farm, finally eating real food. Moments later, they are swamped by a swarm of journalists, all eager to document their miraculous survival. Back at the wreckage, the rest of the group turns on the radio to incredible news. Nando and Roberto have made it. They finally know for certain that rescue is on the way. They even start cleaning themselves up, brushing their teeth and combing their hair, wanting to look their best for the television cameras. Moments later, the rescue helicopters arrive, and the air is filled with pure, unbridled joy. On December 22, 1972, 16 survivors returned from the Andes. They reunited with their families and loved ones after more than 2 months in the middle of nowhere. Many were overwhelmed with happiness, others were in disbelief that they were actually alive, and all of them carried a deep sadness for the friends they had lost. This was the true story of the heroes of the Andes. And with that, our movie comes to an end.